The Callisto Protocol. This is a horror-ish game that came out a couple of days ago, like a week ago now, and I only finished it in about 3 days. Firstly, before we jump into everything, I want to give a huge shout out to my buddy Colin for giving me this copy for free. As a gift, he came over and gifted me with a brand new video game, so I'm really thankful for you, buddy. And just want to let you all know too that this is a review coming from somebody who actually didn't spend the $70 to buy this game, and I'll go ahead and I'll talk more about that later. But I just want to let you know that this is just a review coming from someone who is just playing a game that he got as a gift. And yeah, without further ado, let's talk about the Callisto Protocol. So if you've been watching any of the reviews that I've recently done here on the channel, you'll know that the structure that I've kind of been going with has been breaking down the good, the mixed feelings that I had, and the bad of the video game. And I'm going to go ahead and talk about the good, and I'll talk about, things that I thought were mixed and things that I thought were bad, but it'll be a little bit of a different structure. This was an interesting experience for me, and I want to also just firstly say, before jumping into everything, I didn't have any expectations of this game whenever I received it. I don't want to say I didn't have anticipation for the game, because I remember when they announced it and that it was coming from one of the guys who was a co-director of Dead Space. I was really excited for it. Something like that, just that tagline, like from the creators of Dead Space. This is a series that we haven't seen in a really long time that is beloved by me and many other people. But that got me really excited, just seeing, okay, yeah, we're going to get another Dead Space style game. And everything that we saw from that initial trailer, some of the gameplay that we saw, I was intrigued whenever it was announced. I will also say, though, that whenever time was moving forward and we were seeing more and more of this game, I kind of tuned it out. Not because I wasn't interested or I didn't want to see it. Like, I wasn't avoiding trailers or gameplay or anything like that. I think it just kind of flew by me. I think I was watching state of play stuff and, just things like that. And every single time that Callisto Protocol was being shown, I kind of had this mentality of like, I know what that is. I'll just kind of skip past this, or I'll zone out for a little bit. So I wasn't really seeing a lot of this game before it came out. I was kind of optimistic for it, but I didn't really have any actual expectations going forward in this game. So even though I'm a fan of horror games and this was a single player, story-driven video game, that was kind of enough to have my interest piqued. But like I said, coming from the guys who made Dead Space, I was like, ooh, this could be really interesting. I will say too, though, that I didn't really have any plan on actually pre-ordering this game or getting it on day one. So like I said earlier, my buddy bought me this game, and that's how I have this game. And I'm not going to lie. Had he not bought me this video game, I probably would never play this game. That might just be from me maybe looking at reviews later down the line or something and just realizing it's not for me, or even just maybe from seeing some of the gameplay, I probably would have just decided, you know what, I think I'm going to save my money. A piece of me has like this sort of morbid excitement to tell you about my experience with this game, because I'm not going to say that it was a positive experience, but I do want to go ahead and I want to talk about what I did like with the game. I don't just want to be fully negative in this review. There are some things that this game does pretty well and definitely deserves some recognition for. And one of those things for me is just the graphics as a whole. This looks like a next generation game. Now it's current generation, but in the time it was announced to the time that it is now and it's here in our hands, this looks like a brand new game, As far as textures and things like that go, the game is impressive, as far as visuals and character models. You look at them and they look almost like real life. Like, this is a very, it's going for that photorealistic look. And in many ways, it accomplishes that. And another thing that this game does, I don't know if this is a setting on the PS4 version or the PS4 Pro, but it has graphics options for, do you want to play this in 30 FPS, texture quality is really high, you get some ray tracing stuff, or you have the option to play it in smooth 60 frames per second, and there's also an option for like this film grain setting, and I just kind of played with it on because whenever I was playing with the settings, I didn't see too much of a difference with it on or off, so I just played with it on. And overall, as far as the graphics and stuff go, and the atmosphere as well, I think that the game accomplishes what the atmosphere is supposed to be like, and accomplishes, you know, just making a good looking game. And I'm saying this now, and I'm not gonna lie, guys, this is kind of the only these are really the only main positives that I have to say for this game. I don't just want to say, well, the game is pretty, it has that going for it, but honestly, you know, I want to be honest. I want to be totally truthful with all of you guys. These are my opinions. Like, this is how I felt playing this game, and I'm not going to lie, I didn't have a great time playing with this game. So for this next portion, now that we've got the good out of the way, the mixed and the bad are all kind of clumped together. The lines are a bit blurred for me on what I thought was a good move, or I felt kind of weird about, or it was a bad move altogether. So we'll just jump into it. The first thing that I noticed was the dialogue wasn't matching with the movement of the characters' mouths. And I'm not sure if this was something that was motion captured or anything like that, but you think in today's gaming sphere and the way that we go about doing photorealistic stuff, and, you know, this was really chalked up to be this big cinematic experience, you're going to definitely lose points from me if you can't match up what the characters are saying with the actual, like, movement of their lips. So that was something that, like, I mean, multiple times, but it was in the very beginning of the game too. So right off the bat, my impressions of the game were of, like, okay, that's a little sloppy. I mean, come on, guys. And like I had mentioned with being able to change from 60 FPS to 30 FPS or vice versa, there was an issue that I was seeing, and I was playing this in performance mode. I wanted smooth gameplay. I like the idea of just having a cinematic experience where everything looks cool and stuff, but with the gameplay that we had here and character movement and motion blur and all that stuff, I just wanted to play in 60 frames per second. So that's the setting that I had on. But one thing that also really stood out to me, especially in the beginning portion of the game, because that's really where you're going to see this most, I think, but there's a lot of fire. The fire, even in the 60 frames per second mode, I don't know how many frames a second the fire was running at, but it wasn't 60. And it might have not even been 30. It may have been lower than that. Maybe it was just 30 and it was just so obvious because of the clashing of frame rates. But it seemed to look fairly smooth whenever I was playing it in 30 frames per second. Like, it seemed like it was following with the rest of the frames in the game. But in 60 frames per second mode, the fire moved so choppily. And for me personally, I mean, I saw that, and that this was like right off the heels of seeing the dialogue not really matching up with, you know, the movement of the lips and stuff. And it just kind of started this ball rolling for me of like, is this game polished, you know? So there's that. And another technical issue that I was coming into pretty regularly, and I even looked this up. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't just coming across something that was supposed to happen in the game. But there were a handful of times that I would open up a chest. There are these chests laying through some areas of this, you know, of this world, of this map, and you can open them up, and inside you'll have goodies if you can fit them in your inventory, or you can drop stuff and you can pick stuff back out of the chest. There were multiple times where I would walk up to a chest and I would open it up and nothing would be inside of it. And I know there are, you know, those chests where something flies out at you and still there's nothing inside of it. I'm not really talking about those. I just mean you'd be walking around, you'd spot a chest, go, oh, I'm going to open it. And then you open it up and then nothing. Nothing goes into your inventory. You don't pick up anything at all out of it. Whenever you look inside the chest, it's not like, hey, you want to pick up the stuff that you didn't pick up? No, it's just like there's nothing in there. And I'm pretty sure, I mean, I was trying to look this up and finding videos of other people opening those chests. And for me personally, I would just came into, it was like maybe 2 or 3 times where I would open up a chest and nothing would be inside of it at all. So I kind of felt a little gypped, you know? So wasn't a fan of that. And there was another part in the game too where I went to one of those stations where you can open up the menu and start upgrading your items or buy, you know, health packs and stuff like that. And as I was selling my items to get the Callisto credits, which is such a stupid name for the currency. It sounds like a microtransaction type thing. Anyways, I was selling stuff so that I could upgrade my weapons, and then the game just crashed on me. And I wish I had video footage of this happening, but I don't. And I mean, I want to show you a lot of these bugs that I had. I just don't have the footage of all that stuff here. But the game crashed on me, and it set me back not very long, thankfully, but nonetheless, it was kind of frustrating to see. And then very shortly after that, at a point in the story, I was supposed to walk through this sort of wooded area. Like, there's lots of trees all around and stuff, and there are enemies hiding in the trees and stuff. If you've played the game, you probably know the one area that I'm talking about. But right as I walked onto a bridge, I just fell straight through the ground. Actually, no, now that I think about it, there was no bridge to walk on. I think there was nothing there, and I just walked out into nothingness. And then I just fell through the ground, and it acted as a death, obviously. And then it restarted, and then I walked through that same door again, and there was a bridge there. And it's not like a portion of the game where the bridge is supposed to disappear, and I was just too late, or I was too early, or something like that. No, like, this was a pretty bad glitch. So far, I had just been encountering little bugs here and there that in some ways were actually game-breaking. As far as technical issues go, and this was actually after the 1.0.6 patch, as far as I'm aware, I think people were having difficulties with, technical issues before this patch, but even still, with this patch that was supposed to fix up a lot of that, I was experiencing a lot of technical issues, so I wasn't very appreciative of that. But anyways, that's the technical stuff out of the way. Now I just kind of want to talk about the visuals here. And the visuals, one thing that I can say here that I could not stop thinking about the more I went into this game, and that is that I felt that the art direction here in general was very bland. I'm not going to lie, I didn't really like looking at this game very much. There were so many rooms that just started to blend together, and some areas where I would be confused as to where I was at and would walk back into rooms that I was previously in just because, I don't know, it felt like all of the rooms just kind of started feeling the same after a little bit. But also, the color palette here that we have here, just the color scheme of the game, there is not a lot of variety or vibrancy in the colors whatsoever. You're going to see a lot of just dark, like there's not a lot of lighting, and sure, you could say some of that makes sense because of the setting that you're in, but overall, not a lot of stuff was lit very well, and that was just a little frustrating after a long time. And a lot of the colors that you're going to be seeing is a lot of gray and black and brown and red. Just a lot of dark colors. You'll obviously, with the thing on the back of your neck, you'll see green. Every now and then you might see a little bit of orange, but overall, this is really what you're going to be looking at for the entirety of the game. And after a while, I just got tired of looking at it. I don't know. I just felt like it was so boring to look at. And I know I had mentioned that the graphics here are fairly impressive, but at the same time, and this is kind of another mixed thing. It's like I like the graphics, but at the same time, you look at this game, and if you know the Unreal Engine, that's all you can really think of whenever you're looking here at this game is, this is an Unreal game. I can see that just as far as, I don't know, the art direction goes and just designing structures that you're going to be walking around in and all this stuff. It all just feels very familiar. It feels a little like an Unreal Tech demo to some degree, just as far as the visuals go. Like I said, just overall, visuals were pretty boring for me. And another thing to mention too, before we really jump into talking about what I thought with the gameplay and the story and all that stuff, I'm a big sound person. Typically, if I'm going to be playing an immersive game like this, I'm going to be playing with headphones on or something like that. I'm going to be paying attention to the sound design here in the game. And there was a lot of good sound design here, but I also felt like the sound wasn't proper, like it had some mixing issues every now and then. Sometimes I would like, there's not a lot of music in the game, right? It's mostly just eerie sounds. And sometimes an eerie track will be playing in the background, and then I'll just walk kind of into a room or around the corner, and it's as if I walked away from really eerie sounds or something, because it fades out and it drops out completely very suddenly, and it seems really random every single time that it happened. And it's not like it was supposed to be this dramatic like silence so that you're shocked whenever something pops out at you or something, because that never really happened to me. Like, this was just an issue that I was noticing with the sound, and it just got on my nerves every now and then. And like I said, like, these are little things where I'm like, I don't know if this is just technical issues or if this game is just not polished, but stuff like that was really frustrating for me. Okay, so let's talk about the gameplay. And the gameplay here, like, where do I begin? I have notes here pulled up because I want to talk about everything, and I want to make sure that this isn't just some sort of rambling mess. So I have some sort of structure, so I'm going to try to refer to these notes as, you know, as structurally sound as I possibly can. But I'll just start with the exploration. This game feels very on rails. There is a little bit of exploration to be done. You know, there's little rooms to deviate off into that kind of take you into a little circle, and it just brings you back to right where you were. But even in those explorative rooms, you're not really going to be finding anything of interest. Unless you're looking for something like some more ammo, or another health pack, or some Callisto credits. You're not really going to be finding anything very interesting in these areas. You could say maybe you just want to explore just to see, I don't know, designs of the ship that you're on or the prison that you're on or something like that. But ultimately, exploration here is really, really bland. And for the most part, you're just going to be on rails from the start of the story to the end of the story. I wish there was a little bit more exploration here, but there's not. And the exploration that is here is not interesting at all. And another thing here too, every time that you kill an enemy, you have the option to press the triangle button and you can stomp on the enemy's body. And whenever you do that, you can pick up items that they drop. Like you stomp on an enemy's body and then, oh, look, you found some ammo. Oh, you found some Callisto credits. Oh, you found a health repack or regeneration pack or something. But whenever you learn about stomping, and it basically, you know, it tells you, hey, whenever you stomp on dead bodies, you'll find items and stuff like that. After that, for me personally, I was like, okay, cool. What else can I stomp on? You're playing a game that is kind of reliant on you finding items for your survival through this prison. There are so many dead bodies all over the ground. You know, bodies that you did not kill. Like, these are bodies that are just laying there because the developers just put them there as like set pieces or something. But they also have ragdoll physics. So you can stomp on their bodies, but they, at least in my experience, never dropped anything. I don't think any of these dead bodies actually drop anything unless you actually kill that enemy. So there were multiple times in the very beginning of the game where I would just, oh, look, there's just a corpse on the ground. I'm going to go stomp on it. You know, see what it's going to give me. But every single time I did, I was always left with disappointment because they never ever drop anything. And, you know, it just felt a little weird to me that the game gives you this option to explore and find items by stomping on things, but basically it's saying, but you can actually really only stomp on these one things, and if you don't stomp on these one things, you're not going to find anything. And that's just a little frustrating to me. I was really hoping that just in exploring I would be able to like find something on the ground. Every now and then you can find a little box or something. It's very clear. You'll know exactly what sort of boxes I'm talking about. They're like highlighted with this sort of neon purple or blue lines around it and stuff. Clearly you can either smash them with your baton, or shoot them with your gun, or stomp on them or something. Those things are going to give you items, but unless it's one of those, or unless it's an enemy that you kill, there's not really any sort of just like, I don't know, I just wish I could stomp on some stuff, because I'm also playing on DualSense, you know, the DualSense controller, And sometimes it feels really good to stomp on some stuff. Sometimes it feels kind of satisfying. And the fact that I'm just kind of left with empty hands here, you know, with all of these dead bodies just laying around, and I want to stomp on them and get items, it's just frustrating. So that part was annoying. And then also, this is another thing that made me turn off the game at some point, just because I got so tired of it. But I would say that at the bare minimum, like a third of the game, most of this game consists of you squeezing through tight corridors, like shimmying your body through tight little, you know, walkways, or crawling through vents, or crawling through tight spaces and stuff like that. And it is so boring. It is the most boring thing that you can, like, put into a game. It's basically like a QuickTime event, right? But it's not. It's not even as interactive as a QuickTime event. Something like QuickTime events actually require you to kind of be on your toes and be ready for something to happen. Nothing ever happens here. When you're crawling through spaces, when you're, you know, shimmying through tight spots, it's just so boring. Like, you can't do anything but just hold the forward button, and the game just, if you're crawling through like a vent that has turns and stuff, don't even worry about moving the analog stick. As long as you're pressing the forward button, you're always going to be just moving forward, and nothing's ever, like, I don't know, like, nothing's ever actually, like, of any sort of threat whenever you're doing this. It's always safe. I've never been actually chased or caught in any of these. Something like that would have been really cool, but nothing like that ever happens, and you're just crawling through these little spaces, and it's so boring. So, I mean, as far as exploration goes here, it's just boring. So outside of exploration, the other thing that you're going to be doing a lot of in this game is combat. This is a fairly action-heavy game. The first thing that it really kind of teaches you how to do is dodge enemies. Throughout my entire play experience, especially in the very beginning, I wasn't really getting the dodging right. I wasn't getting it down. And I thought for a little while that it was because, okay, you know, this is a new mechanic. I have not played this game. I'm just learning here how to dodge and stuff like that. But no. Even through the end of the game, I'm pretty confident in my ability to just, like, learn a concept and be able to practice it fairly, you know, often in a game and kind of get it down, right? I felt like just dodging in this game was very, very regularly unresponsive. With the amount of little technical difficulties that I was having and little things that were popping in and out and enemies just glitching into existence every now and then, I really think that the dodging system here in this game is just not polished, and it's not responsive. So as far as staying alive goes, I mean, there were plenty of times where I died, I think completely due to the dodge just wasn't working. I would literally be trying, you know, like, I'm doing the thing, and then it just doesn't work out. That gets really frustrating really fast. Another thing that you learn how to do very early on in the game is use a melee weapon. The melee weapon is useful. I mean, realistically, as you're going through the game and you get guns and stuff like that, and you get other weapons outside of the melee weapon is still going to be a commonly used weapon throughout the whole game. But I'm not going to lie too, and I mean really, I say this honestly, I really did not feel like using this baton that you have was nearly as satisfying as the developers really thought that it was going to be. And maybe some of that too is maybe I had a little bit of higher hopes with the DualSense controller, and maybe it just didn't feel right whenever I was using it. But all in all, I just felt like it was a bit of a dud, and for, you know, a main weapon that you're using throughout the game, it doesn't feel very satisfying. I mean, that's kind of another trend that we see here in the game as far as the gameplay goes, because the other thing too is you only get like 5 guns in this game, and all of the guns, with the exception of maybe one, because it's a machine gun, almost every gun here feels the exact same. Obviously, people are going to be using a lot of Dead Space comparisons here. I felt like the limb detachment system from Dead Space, it worked really well. I felt like in this, none of my weapons were actually doing what I wanted them to do. I would be aiming for legs, I'd be aiming for arms and aiming for heads and stuff. Sometimes they would blow off, sometimes they wouldn't. It just did not feel very satisfying to be shooting these enemies or to be hitting them over the head with the baton. I guess I forgot to mention this here too in the good portion, but the gore here, I mean, you're playing a game that's kind of selling you on just how brutal it is. It works for me. I like the gore. I like, just the way that these enemies die, every now and then. Some of them are a little anticlimactic, but for the most part, I mean, the brutality here is really cool. It just sucks whenever the weapons that you're using, like, you don't feel like you deserve these really intense, brutal kills, So that was also a pretty big letdown for me. And on the topic of weapons as well, sure, there are only 5 weapons here in the game, but you can rotate through them. You can either select them manually or you can press a button that rotates through them. But rotating through them and selecting them, going from one weapon to another, it takes so long. It takes like an annoying amount of time. And this is not, I never felt anxious or, I never felt stressed because I was getting swarmed by enemies and they were all coming at me and I wasn't changing my weapon fast enough. It wasn't ever stressful. It was just annoying. It was so slow to the point where I was just frustrated with it. Let's just say, like, if there is a sequel here to this game, one thing that they need to do is, they need to make switching weapons feel a lot more fluid than it actually is here in this game. And just in general, whenever we're talking here about the combat and playing the game, we've talked about exploring and all that stuff. The variety here is essentially non-existent. You're basically either walking around and shimmying through walls. There's a portion of the game later on where it kind of switches up the formula slightly and it's a stealth section. And we'll talk more about that later because I have strong opinions about that as well. But other than that portion right there and a portion where you go in through the snow, there's just no variety here. Everything feels like you're just doing the same thing the entire game. You're just shimmying and crawling through little spaces. You open up lockers and chests every now and then. You stomp on bodies to get stuff. You upgrade weapons and stuff like that. And you just do that until you finish the game, pretty much. You're fighting enemies the whole time. They all feel the same. It's frustrating. Talking about weapon upgrades, too. Upgrade animations are kind of cool. Every time you go into the upgrade menu and you decide what you want to do with your weapon or the little arm gadget that you have, you watch this animation of you putting your weapon into this system, or it prints out a little chip for you that you put inside the arm piece, and the animations are kind of cool. They're kind of gimmicky, but really it's just like after a little while the gimmick starts to wear off and you're like, okay, I get it, I'm upgrading my weapon, come on, skip through it, and you can't. And it's just another thing that makes you feel like, man, this game is just trying to fill itself with a lot of waiting. Just a lot of, like, either just pressing the forward button to crawl through places or just waiting for animations to play out. And so much of this game is just full of you just waiting for the game to finish doing its thing. And that's not fun. It's so boring. And like I mentioned just a minute ago with the enemies and just fighting them, there's like no real enemy variation here. Some of them do different things. There's a specific kind of enemy that can kind of camouflage itself and it crawls on walls, and it's interesting and it's a little stressful whenever you first run into it, but then you realize that it essentially functions the exact same as all the other enemies. All of them look way too similar to one another as far as just and this is another thing that I was talking about with just the art design here. These enemy designs, almost all of them look the exact same. I for the most part can't distinguish the difference between many of these enemies because they mostly feel and look and fight all the exact same. And so like I was saying with the stealth segment, there is a portion in this game where you encounter an enemy that cannot see. They're blind. So, and honestly, they make almost the exact same sound every now and then that clickers make in the Last of Us games. Whenever you encounter these enemies, you have to crouch around so that they don't hear you. And whenever you maneuver your way kind of behind the enemy or a little bit to the side, or just whenever the stealth attack prompt decides to pop up on the screen, you can stealth attack them, and it's really loud. Your main character is grunting and shouting and stuff, and the enemy is obviously screaming in pain, and you throw it on the ground and you can stomp on their body a million times. But as long as you're not standing up and running around, none of the enemies are actually going to hear you. There was a portion in the game where there were like 4 or 5 of these blind zombie alien type creatures, all like in the same small space together. And I stealth attacked every single one of them and stomped on their bodies, and it was loud and obnoxious every single time. And the animation was always just the same animation every single time that I killed them. It was frustrating. It was frustrating, and it was just taking forever. And it got to the point where I just started realizing that none of these enemies are noticing what I'm doing here. So there's nothing stopping me from just stealth killing every single one of these enemies. And as long as you're just crouching and moving at a normal pace while you're crouching, you're not ever going to get caught. Like, it's super simple. It's so easy. It's so repetitive, and it's so boring. And we'll talk about stuff like the final boss and the last boss fight and just things like that later on in the video. But just as far as enemy design goes, even the final boss of this game, it felt like I was just fighting the same kind of enemy that they've just been thrown at me the entire game, and it just takes a little longer, and they've got more health, but that's about it. And it's frustrating and it's boring. But now I do want to talk about the story here, and I've mostly been trying to avoid some spoilers here and there, but for the most part, if you haven't played the game and you want to experience this story, to save your time, save your money, just keep watching, honestly. But I'm going to talk about some story spoilers and final boss stuff and things like that. But one of the things I do want to talk about is just the characters. These characters, man, they are so one note. They are so uninteresting. I did not care about any of these characters. The main protagonist, it's not that he was unlikable, and that's the thing that really frustrates me here. I did not like him at all, and I did not hate him in any regard, really. I just did not care about him. His design and his, like, buzzed head, and, you know, he's just killing all these enemies the whole time. I mean, the guy, the character, just everything about him just seems so like video game protagonist who just kills aliens and zombies and stuff. I mean, it's as generic as you can possibly get with a character. There was really no sort of nuance to him in any way, or really any of the supporting cast. Even whenever they try to do something kind of nuanced, it just every single time falls flat on its face. And I don't know, this whole time it's like I can just see behind the curtain, and everything behind the curtain is just so like, it's just, as far as the characters go, everything just feels so soulless. And I'm not trying to just be nothing but overly negative here on the game, but I was just so unbelievably bored here with this game. And talking about the final boss and our main antagonist here, you could say there's one of two kind of main antagonists. You could say it's the director of everything, whatever his name was. I couldn't tell you. You could say he was the main antagonist, but there's also another character who you see early on, right after you're wrongfully thrown into prison, and he's trying to kind of give you the rundown of like, here's the hierarchy, like, okay, like, you're gonna listen to me, okay, you're a prisoner and I'm doing my job, so you better shut up and listen to me. Like, this guy is just so freaking corny, and you see him twice after you first see him at the beginning of the game. You maybe run into him 2 times in the middle of the game. It's very brief and very inconsequential. It's so boring. And then you fight him at the end of the game, and he's the final boss. And I just felt like that this antagonist did not deserve to be the antagonist. I don't know, you know, it's like, not that many of the stuff here in the game really felt like it deserved much of anything, but especially the antagonist here going up against our protagonist, it felt undeserved. It felt cheap. It felt like, okay, they're just throwing this guy at us so that we have a big bad to fight at the end. And it it sucked, and I hated him. He was not a good antagonist. That's not how you do it. And just speaking of corny dialogue, this game is chock full of the most cliche story beats that you could ever hope for. especially from just an action game, right? There is a character who, our main guy, I keep blanking on his name. I think his name is Jacob. Our main character. It's like Jacob or Jason, one of those two. Let's call him Jacob. I think that's right. So Jacob runs into, I believe her name is Danny. They see each other at the beginning of the game, and they kind of see each other throughout some of the middle of the game. And they don't like each other for very clear reasons at the beginning of the game. But there is this portion later on in the game where these two characters meet up with one another. And our main character, he has this whole little speech to her of just like, look, you don't have to like me, and I sure don't have to like you. But look and listen, if we don't work together, we're never going to get out of this place. So we have to work together, even though we don't like each other. And I'm just like, oh my God. Like, it's so frustrating, because it's like, you don't have to do that. You don't have, like, I felt like there were moments in this game where they were conveying certain emotions. Words were not being spoken, and I was able to get it. Nothing too crazy, but it just felt like there were so many points where there just did not need to be, like, no dialogue would have been better than the dialogue that we actually had here. I guess that's what I'm really trying to say here. It was just so frustrating, and oftentimes there would be dialogue, like anytime that you were maybe confused, like especially towards the end of the game where things are kind of getting revealed, there are moments where you're thinking like, oh, I think I'm kind of understanding what's happening. And then a character will straight up just tell you exactly what's happening. So, because they don't want you to be thinking too hard. They don't want you to really, be trying to piece this thing together. Like, no, like, you're already playing a stressful game. Don't stress yourself out thinking about the story. It's everything that's happening here is not as complex as the creators really are making it feel like they think it is, and it's just frustrating whenever they just tell you every single thing. And it's like, I'm smarter than that, guys. Please believe me. Allow me to just experience a story and piece things together without you just throwing it in my face like what the answer is. It's just frustrating, and I'm not a fan of that kind of storytelling at all. Another piece of this game that just really frustrated me was I think the premise is actually pretty good. I like the world here. I think that there is opportunity and there is room to develop as far as the setting goes. And like I said, our main guy is wrongfully thrown into prison, and all of this outbreak stuff sort of happens. So the whole rest of the time you're playing through the game trying to escape this place and figure out what's going on. And as a premise, I think that's pretty interesting. I was fairly hooked at the beginning just because I started off wanting to know where this goes. But just throughout the entire game, literally up until like the very end of the game, it just does such a bad job at keeping me interested. It just doesn't do a good job at making me feel curious about the world, if that makes sense. One of the things that the game does to help build some of the lore and just some world building stuff and some context to what's going on around you, the game leaves these audio logs that you can find, and you pick them up. As far as exploration goes too, this is probably the biggest piece that you could be missing as far as exploration goes. You could be missing out on these audio logs. And if you're like me, then you hear that and you're like, okay, cool, then I'm not missing anything. Because audio logs, in my opinion, are some of the worst way that you could convey the story to the player. These are audio logs where some information could be very, very easily explained through a cutscene or told through a boss or something like that. Just stuff like that. I don't want to have to just stop my game so that I can open up the menu and listen to the minute-long audio log that I just found that's going to just ramble a bunch of nonsense that I don't care about. And that's it. I mean, really, in every single one of these audio logs, I don't think there was a single one that I heard that I thought was genuinely interesting and made me feel like I actually cared about what was going on in this world, or cared about what was going on with these characters, or, understanding what's happening to these NPCs and everything like that. Like, I just did not care, and it's just such a lazy way of storytelling in video games, and I don't want to see it anymore. Please stop doing this in video games. It's so frustrating. And it's just like, it just feels like everything from the start of the game to the end of the game, everything in the middle there, it just feels so uninspired and boring. I mean, obviously we know where the inspirations are as far as game design goes. It's trying to be another Dead Space type video game, but it's just so clear, and it feels almost like a fan game every now and then, and it's frustrating. When I talk about the ending of the game too, another positive thing that I can say too is just, I think the ending of this game probably had me the most intrigued as far as just everything that was happening here. But I'm talking about like the last 30 minutes of the game. Up until the last 30 minutes of the game, it's a whole lot of just stuff that I don't care about. It was so boring. The characters, the dialogue, just the visuals, the sound design, the enemies, everything up until that last 30 minutes was not good to me. And then we get to the last 30 minutes of the game, and it's really interesting, but it's also the last 30 minutes of the game. That's the end. You get to the interesting part, and then the game is over. And that was so frustrating to me. I just feel like I'm rambling at this point of just like how much this really, really frustrated me. And it was so boring, guys. This game cost $70. I finished it in about 7 or 8 hours. Oftentimes, I'm someone who can look at a piece of art, and if the creator of that art thinks that the value is $70, all power to that artist here. But as a consumer, I look at a game like this, and not only do I feel like the game itself was not worth $70, but I beat it in like 8 hours or something like that. And I almost wish that the game was shorter, because like I said, there was just so much padding and boringness to this game. I was just so completely uninterested in the combat and the gameplay. And like I said, guys, I liked Dead Space. I was excited to play another Dead Space style game. But this game, the Callisto Protocol, it was too short, and it should have been shorter. Before I talk about just all the other things that I felt like could have been, I felt like were missed opportunities, I just want to say first and foremost, I really don't think that this game is worth $70. I would say at most, I would pick this game up for $20. At like that's the most expensive that I could, and that's including the DLC that's going to be coming out later on. If you're just going to buy the base game, 10 or 15 bucks. If you're going to buy the game with the DLC and stuff, at most, I would say drop 20 bucks on this game. It might be worth it if you just want to check it out, but realistically, $70. And I feel a little bit bad for my buddy Colin, who bought me this game, because I knew he was excited for the game as well. And I think we were just both a little optimistic for it because we didn't know much about the game at all. And now that we have the game and I've played it, and I know that somebody paid $70 for me to play through it, I can't help but feel sympathy for people who purchased this game. It's frustrating because there are interesting ideas here brought up. There are a few little missed opportunities here, and I think the biggest one that is a huge missed opportunity. I wish they did something with this, because pretty early on in the game, whenever you get the chip thing implanted into the back of your neck, one of the characters says something along the lines of, this may start messing with your mind, right? You may start not totally thinking straight, like this might affect your brain a little bit. And so whenever that happened, whenever that was said in the game, my ears perked up, and I'm like, oh, okay, so we're probably going to see some like psychological horror stuff, like maybe seeing some things that aren't there, but we'll have to be fighting anyway, just something along those lines. And I got pretty excited. And throughout the story, I think there's maybe only 1 or 2 instances in cutscenes only where the main character will see a vision of like a corpse or one of the aliens or something in the background, but it's all in a cutscene, and it never like got me whenever it happened. It just made me think, oh, he's hallucinating. Got it, because they said that might happen in the earlier cutscene. And then at the end of the game, during the last 30 minutes, there is a portion where our main character is walking through, some doorways, and then he comes to a door. The door opens up, and there's just a wall behind it. And he's like, what the heck, or whatever? And then he turns around, and the room that he was in is a completely different room. He's like on a different planet or something, and stuff like that. I'm like, that's really cool. That's really interesting. I wish more stuff like that happened in the game. Stuff like, am I really in the room that I think I'm in? Are these enemies actually around me, or am I just shooting at nothing, or other people who are innocent? Like things like that. I'm not a game developer. I couldn't even do this if I tried. But if I was sitting in director's seat, for the director's seat for this game, that is the way that I would be going about this game. They mentioned, hey, there's going to be some psychological stuff maybe happening to you with this thing in the back of your neck. And then it almost never happens in the game until the last freaking 30 minutes of the game. And that is so frustrating. I wish we had some actual, psychological horror stuff happening here in the game, because it sets it up for that to happen. And then it never really happens. And that's the biggest missed opportunity for me, is I wish we had that. Other things that, really could have been super beneficial if they were tweaked just a little. Just a little bit more variation in the way that you go about approaching combat, some enemy designs, an actually threatening antagonist. This was a game full of missed opportunities, and it just seemed like it was just checking a bunch of boxes. Like, did we check that box? Yeah. Did we check that box? Cool. We checked that box? Awesome. But there's no charm here, and that is the most frustrating thing. My expectations were not very high for this game. They weren't really low either. I just kind of thought, okay, cool, we're having this Dead Space style game. And in the beginning of this game, they really are selling you on okay, this is going to be a space sci-fi horror experience. Strap in, folks. All of the advertising was you from the creators of Dead Space. That's what this game was set up to be. And if there's two things really, that I can tell you about just my personal experience with this game, it's that, one, I was never scared, even one time. I did not find this game anxiety-inducing or bone-chilling in any regard. This was the most milquetoast horror game that I've ever played in my entire life, and that makes me really sad. I'm a big horror game fan. Games that I've talked about on this channel recently have mostly been JRPGs, and the biggest thing is I'm a story-driven gamer. I like horror stories. I like the camp that's with a lot of those. But with this game in particular, I was expecting at least a horror game. I was expecting, at the bare minimum, a game that would make me anxious or have my heart rate, bumping a little bit. I'm telling you guys, I don't think, not a single time in this game did I actually feel scared of anything that was behind any of the corners or anything like that. Even just the ending of the game, they end the game with a jump scare and a setup for a sequel. Like I'm gonna want to see what happens next or something. And the jump scare, it was just to put a hard exclamation point at the end of this sentence of saying the Callisto Protocol is a horror game. The end. And it's what? When was it a horror game? I obviously understand where they were trying to go with horror elements here and there, but the way it was pulled off was very poor. And I think a lot of that has to do with some of the bugs, it has to do with some of the sound design, it has to do with the gameplay and exploration, it has to do with the characters and the story. Ultimately, I never felt any sort of fear here in this game. And the last thing I'll say about it that coincides with what I'm talking about here is this game did nothing but make me feel bored. The game was short, and it should have been shorter. I was unbelievably unimpressed with this game. The biggest reason why I think I'm so frustrated with it, even with having no expectations of it at all, it's that knowing that my buddy bought me this video game for $70, for $70, and it was barely worth half that. Very boring game. Very unimpressed with this game. I hope there's not a sequel. If there is a sequel, I'm not gonna get it. I hope nobody buys it for me. Please don't buy me a sequel to this game. Please. I think if I were to give it a score, I would say at most, it's a 4 out of 10. At most. But I want to say it's a 3 out of 10. Just because, I mean, it's a game. Sure. I'll say it's a 4 out of 10. Because there's a story it tries to tell. There's a game to be played for the most part, but it's incredibly boring. And I don't recommend this game. For horror fans, just play Alien Isolation again. That game is fantastic. You know, play the original Amnesia. You know, I don't know, just play anything else. I mean, like, play Outlast. This is not, play Dead Space. If there's another thing I can just say here, like, whenever the Dead Space remake comes out, I mean, that's a game that I'm still excited to play because I know that I like Dead Space. And if it's just a remake of something that I know I already really like that came out back in 2008 or whatever, I'm going to be more interested in that. But this was a new IP that did nothing new. And that is the biggest thing here. It's very boring. It does nothing new. I felt like I'm not going to lie, other than having content to do as far as making a review here, I felt like I fully wasted my time. And I don't like my time being wasted, especially with video games. Typically, whenever I play a video game that I don't like, I'll stop playing it because it was a brand new game and I knew it was going to be shorter. That was like the only thing about this game that I had heard before I actually played it. I at least told myself, you know what, I'm going to play through this game and I'm going to give a review. I mean, it's a brand new game. I'm trying to grow my channel here a little bit. I'll play through this game and I'll review it. Not saying that I necessarily regret that, but I feel like my time has been wasted, and that's really the biggest thing that I can say about this game. So anyways, that was my review and all of my thoughts here on the Callisto Protocol. I know a lot of it is a bit rambly here. Tell me what you thought about this game. Go ahead in the comments below. Did you like the Callisto Protocol? If you did, tell me why. I want to know why. I don't like disliking games. I'm someone who's fairly positive when it comes to video games. I don't just want to hate on something for the sake of hating on something. If you like this game, tell me everything that you liked about this game. I want to feel like I like this game as well. I just don't right now. And who knows, maybe your comment could change my mind. So go ahead down below. Let me know what you thought of the Callisto Protocol. Hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, hit the like button, and in the description below, join the Discord. Check out my Patreon. You're going to get many of my videos a day early, so that's something. But with all that said, everyone, I will see you all in the next video. Bye-bye.